Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Charlie Nicklin. I'm the Chief Executive of IAgrE, and I'd like to thank you all for joining our August lunchtime lecture. Today, I'd like to welcome Alastair Taylor, who many of you will know as the former CEO of IAgrE. And for those that don't know, Alastair is an incorporated engineer, a chartered environmentalist, and a long-standing member and honorary fellow of IAgrE. Alastair spent a large proportion of his career in and around education before joining the IAgrE as its CEO for 6 years, for the 6 years up until his official retirement. Today, Alastair is going to talk to us about agricultural engineering in Africa, a project which he started during his time in IAgrE in conjunction with the Royal Academy of Engineering. Alastair has continued to support the project and has recently completed a report along with a call for action to grow the profession in Africa. Alastair will share the story and showcase some of the challenges facing Africa together with some of the potential solutions. Just before Alastair starts, you're all currently muted. If you would like to ask questions, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll unmute you so you can ask in person. So no further ado, over to you, Alastair.
Well, thank you for inviting me to talk at this lunchtime lecture. It's a great privilege, and it's lovely to see so many friends and names that are so common to me from my role within the institution up until a couple of years ago. But as Charlie said, when I was working for IAgrE, I was heavily involved with some work with the Royal Academy of Engineering, which was supporting some of their work in connection with the Africa Prize. And I'll say more about that in just a few minutes. And it sort of rolled on after the I finished, so but I continued with it on a voluntary basis. So you know, really, I think it's important that we as an institution support things globally where we can, and if it's at no cost to us. And I think this particular initiative is about showing our support and our commitment to supporting a part of the world where agricultural engineering is important. So what I want to do today is tell you about some of the challenges really in Africa which are being sought to be addressed by the profession, but also tell you the story of some of the things we've been doing with the Pan-African Society for Agricultural Engineering, and give you a bit of background and insight into what's happening and where it's going, and what the direction and the trajectory is, in order that you can get involved if you wish, and if you're in a position to, you know, through your work or your professional life, to support what's going on in Africa. I think this is my opportunity to share that with you and help you to understand. So I've been involved with some workflow for the Pan-African Society for Agricultural Engineering, PASAE, although it calls itself AfroAgEng for short, which I think runs off the tongue a little easier. And they've been doing some quite intense work over the last, well, since 2012 really, to try to grow the profession across the African, particularly the sub-Saharan African continent. So, you know, I'm not going to give you a geography lesson, but you can imagine that North Africa is much more influenced by Europe, and particularly French, because it was part of the old French Empire, I think, back in the day. And so the sub-Saharan Africa, I think, is where there's a much greater connection with the UK through the old Commonwealth countries, and well, dare I say it, the Empire, if we go back that far. So I think there is an association between the UK and sub-Saharan Africa more than there is with North Africa. But the work we've been doing is around trying to understand where agricultural engineering fits in Africa, and trying to call people to action to make a difference. For those of you who don't know me, that's my mugshot. You'll see I was wearing the official tie on that particular day. But, you know, former CEO of the institution, and I still continue in a voluntary capacity, sort of freelancing in agricultural engineering, agri-tech subjects, education, training, and this has been what I've been doing more latterly with the Pan-African Society. The Pan-African Society for Agricultural Engineering, it's just worth saying a little bit about that. I suppose we're used to, certainly within this context, EURENG and the European sort of grouping of engineering associations, and the Pan-African Society is not dissimilar really. It is agricultural engineers from all the various countries across Africa who come together to form this thing called the Pan-African Society for Agricultural Engineering, with various aims and objectives, mainly around trying to promote the discipline, but also trying to share information, run conferences, run events, try to shape the curriculum in universities, try to support and bring on the next generation of engineers, try to sort of connect industry and academia and all those people involved, and try to bring a degree of professionalism across agricultural engineering in Africa. And as you might imagine, African engineering and professional bodies, just the same as the UK, they're quite strong. In South Africa, there's the South African Society for Agricultural Engineers. There's a similar outfit in Kenya, Uganda, Mauritius. There's a similar outfit in, obviously, Nigeria, and down into Zambia as well. So there are various professional bodies and professional societies, as there is in the United Kingdom, across Africa. And bringing these together to support the discipline is what this has all been about. I will be sharing the presentation afterwards. There is a link there to the Pan-African Society there. Interesting website. It's worth going and having a look and seeing what's important. But what is important is to mention that the president of AfroAgEng is an IAgrE member. And he's a gentleman called Linus Sapara, who is a professor at the University of Stellenbosch, long-standing member of IAgrE, and a thoroughly decent man as well. And I count him as a true friend these days. And Linus has been pioneering and promoting agricultural engineering across Africa and shouting it from the rooftops, and with a real passion. And through the presentation, I'll point you towards a video of him that you might want to look at afterwards, where he is talking about the discipline with such amazing passion. But our project really over the last couple of years has been about producing a report there, and the report, front cover of the report there, Agricultural Engineering, a key driver for transforming agriculture to deliver food security and support economic prosperity. Now, some of you who've been involved with IAgrE for a number of years, those words will sound familiar. But because of course, we use those words ourselves in a different form slightly. When we were promoting, following the Beddington report, the importance of agricultural engineering in meeting some of those objectives. And it's a good term, and it certainly has a resonance in Africa in terms of certainly the word food security, which is very, very important there. So I sort of reused those words and adjusted them a little bit in terms of agricultural engineering in Africa. And so this is about a call to action to try to raise the importance and demonstrate where agricultural engineering fits in terms of some of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm assuming you've heard of, and Agenda 2063, which you might not have heard of. Agenda 2063 is the Africa we want. It's about for Africa, by Africa, and it's about the African people wanting to say, what do we need to do in the next 50 or so years to take Africa to where we want it to be? So this report highlights the challenges, it looks at the education, it really celebrates what our young engineers are doing as well, and it sort of highlights the paradigm shift which needs to be made to move the discipline in Africa to a place where it can make a difference. And there's 25 recommendations into this report. I'm not going to read all 25, you'll be very pleased to hear. So fundamentally, what the report is seeking to do is to engage people. This is about engaging our people. And when I say our people, I always speak within an African context. And I think engaging people is a challenge wherever you go, and it's as much of a challenge in Africa as it is in the rest of the world. But our work has been about engaging our people. It's also been about improving efficiency and production systems. And it's interesting, I've got various connections across Africa, and I was talking to someone I know in Uganda. And of course, those of you who know Mark Moore, a fellow of the institution, I don't know whether Mark's with us today, he worked for AGCO and has done a lot of work in Zambia around a thing called the Future Farm. And talking to some people in Africa, you will see some technology in Africa which is every bit as familiar to us as it is there, really, and some amazing technology being used. And although the picture on the screen there, I suppose, is it's a tractor and a cultivator working through some land there in, I think it's in Uganda, but I might be wrong, it might be Kenya. we are dealing with some technology that's very familiar to us, but it's not always utilized to the efficiency which we would want. And so the production isn't as good as we want, and I'll explore that in a little bit more detail just presently. But it's worth saying that mechanization as a subject and as a topic is still viewed as being very, very important in Africa, and improving mechanization and improving the use of equipment to make things better. And as you would anticipate, there's quite a lot of Indian and Chinese machinery there which is being introduced. What there is good machinery, but what there often isn't is the infrastructure to support that. That's quite a problem. More of that in a bit. I mean, really, it's about securing food supply. And, in Africa, generally speaking, the sort of thing you see in the picture is pretty typical of what's eaten. It's much more of a vegetarian diet than our own diet. Yeah, meat features, of course it does. But vegetable production forms a very, very important part of production systems in Africa. And that particular image there was taken in a South African supermarket, and it's as, it could just as easily be Morrison's down the road, couldn't it? There's the quality of the produce and the variety of the produce is every bit as exciting as the stuff we see in our supermarkets here. But of course, underlying that is this colossal problem of food waste. Now, I can't quote the statistics precisely, but they reckon in the developed world, and America and Europe, they reckon that getting on for 50% of the food is wasted, mainly because we throw it away, because we don't use it, because if it's gone past its sell-by date in the fridge, it gets thrown away. But actually, most of the food waste in the Western world comes from the fact that we just eat too much, and which is a odd way of looking at it. It's an interesting parallel, because when you look at food waste in India and in some parts of Asia and in Africa, it's getting on for 50% food waste there, but it's wasted for different reasons. And the waste comes really from what we as agricultural engineers would call post-harvest losses. And the images sort of demonstrate that very well, really. Food which is just left to rot, food that's not grown in a uniform way and is random in terms of when it's harvested, and the consequence of that is that some of it's overripe, some of it's underripe. It leads to waste, and of course you get a lot of waste occurs as a result of issues when it comes to transporting it, and infrastructure issues as well. The food waste is a huge issue across the African continent, and just addressing that on its own can make a big difference. I'm not going to quote percentages. It is as high as 50% in some places, which is a pretty frightening number. The picture of the lorry in the bottom corner there, I think, is significant, because I was hearing about a project where another engineering discipline was doing some work around improving the suspension systems on lorries and trucks. And when you think about that, that's a really simple solution. If we can improve the ride on the truck on those bumpy roads, and as a result of that, the food is less damaged when it arrives at its place of, wherever it's being sent. All of that helps. And so I think that sort of showcases the breadth of engineering, not just agricultural engineering, but I think it makes the point that engineering in all its disciplines has a role to play. And if improving the suspension system on the truck means that the lorry load of bananas there arrive in a better condition and less are wasted, that has to be good, doesn't it, really? I mean, it's not rocket science, pretty basic stuff, but it's innovations and thoughts like that which I think have been quite interesting to learn about in my studies of work going on in Africa. So food waste is the big issue, and initial production at the beginning, getting it planted, getting it sown. Cultural issues as well. I was hearing in South Africa how there would be some people say, we had a good harvest last year, there's no need to worry about next year, we've got enough in store. We all know that you never know what's around the corner in terms of weather and global pandemics and such like. So there's a cultural thing in terms of that mindset of just because you've got a good harvest this year, it doesn't mean to say you can stop farming. You've got to carry on, to feed the rest of the world. So big issues around post-harvest storage, losses, big issues around production systems initially, and all of those are there to be addressed and improved. I mentioned Linus Opara. Linus is a specialist in post-harvest. And I don't know whether there's anyone from Cranfield University here today, but certainly Cranfield University are quite big into post-harvest as well. And I think it's a fascinating area, and I think a bit neglected in terms of agricultural engineering, and one we perhaps need to think about a little bit more. Food waste is such an interesting subject. This is a chart from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, the FAO, who are based in, I think it's in Accra in Nigeria, who do a lot of fascinating work to and are real advocates of improving agriculture and real advocates for the role of agricultural engineering in terms of making a difference. And this particular chart sort of talks about where the issues take place, you know, the production and harvest losses, the inadequate storage facilities, the inadequate processing and packaging, the lack of transportation and distribution systems, the production and harvest waste, and then the efficiencies in the wholesale sector and distribution, and how everyone has a role to play, whether it's the hotels, the food service system, all working together as one to try to improve and take away from this waste position. So quite a lot of our work has been about trying to make the point that agricultural engineering has a role to play in terms of how it can help with all of these different things. It sort of touches everywhere, really. And it comes home particularly when you start looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the Sustainable Development Goals as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And these are fascinating things, you know, when you look at them, no poverty, zero hunger, so on and so forth. Clean water and sanitation, affordable energy, sustainability, so on, life on the land, climate. You know, you have to look at that and you think, well, agricultural engineering touches all of those in one way or another, you know, to a lesser or a greater extent. Clearly, agricultural engineering has a huge role to play in terms of zero hunger. But some of our work was to look at the Sustainable Development Goals and say, well, where can agricultural engineers make a difference in terms of delivering these Sustainable Development Goals? And it was interesting to find out that, you know, we touched just about everything. And because the Sustainable Development Goals are such a big thing across Africa and also the rest of the world in terms of supporting them, particularly with the climate change discussions and everything going on, hanging agricultural engineering on the back of this was something we thought was really important to actually make the point that agricultural engineering and agricultural engineers have a huge role to play in terms of delivering these Sustainable Development Goals. So when you download the report, which you can at the end, you'll be able to read how we map agricultural engineering as a discipline to these Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that's something we can use across here in the Western world as well, because, you know, the Sustainable Development Goals aren't just about Africa, they're about the whole world. And I think agricultural engineering has a role to play, and I think we have a role to play as agricultural engineers, to be noisy, to shout, to make the point, this is where we contribute and this is where we can make a difference. Similarly, when we look at the Agenda 2063, which I mentioned earlier, for Africa, by Africa, it's got a range of aspirations. I think there's 7 in total, and each one of these has got some sub-goals within it. If we look at aspiration 1, a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. And if you look at the goals which hang under that, there's 7 of them. You know, look at there. Goal 3, healthy and well-nourished citizens. Goal 5, modern agriculture with increased productivity and production. And goal 7, environmentally sustainable, and so on. So it is very evident to me as an agricultural engineer that we have a huge role to play in delivering these very important agendas for the African continent. And agricultural engineers get that in Africa, but the rest of Africa have to have it pointed out to them. So that's what AfroAgEng engineers have been doing. We've been trying to point out to the rest of Africa, to ministers, to governors, to the banks, to lenders, hey up guys, agricultural engineering has this incredibly important role to play in delivering that. And I wouldn't say it's an argument, it's a point that I think is being well received, and we're getting a bit of traction with it when we start talking to people. The challenges that are faced by Africa are very sobering. And I think the images here seek to show that. These are well known. You probably know these anyway, but low productivity. So much of agriculture is conducted by animals hauling machines, the hand hoe, very labour intensive. There is still a very big proportion of Africa which works in that way. The infrastructure, there is this huge infrastructure deficit, that road there. Incidentally, I'm going to credit Mark Moore with these pictures from AGCO, one of our members. They're all from Mark, these pictures are, who's worked in Africa extensively, in Zambia and around there. So, there's an African road. When you're taking a truck along there full of fruit or whatever, and it's bouncing along through those ruts, there's a problem. There's an issue. So civil engineers have a role to play in terms of improving the infrastructure and getting things around from A to B. We have issues with the rising population. When you look at the population growth in Africa and the proportion of the population who are under the age of 30, it's very interesting and presents a huge challenge in terms of how we're going to feed all those people. Also, there's this shift of people from the rural areas to the towns as well. Agriculture is not seen as a glamorous area of work. Was forever thus here as well, I think. This shift of people moving to the cities, with all the challenges that brings in terms of moving food to the cities and the infrastructure demands as well. But I think it's the picture of that class combine harvester which I think I want to highlight a little bit. And when we talk about what we've done in the West to try to help Africa, we actually have to ask ourselves the question, how useful and effective has that been? It's all very well shipping out 100 tractors or 100 combine harvesters, but unless we have the support systems that wrap around those and keep them working and keep them active, it's a waste of money. And I think there has been too much, good intention in the past where, and it's all for the right reasons, I'm not going to knock it down. Foreign aid and everything is a fantastic thing, but we need to think about how that is made more sustainable. So one of our recommendations to NGOs and to banks and to the international community is think about how you're spending your money. Can you spend it better and make it more sustainable? Huge issues. But, the key development challenges, we talk about those in terms of what we call the water, food and energy nexus, which you've probably heard of. And, if you think about that, that's much the same as the agricultural engineering nexus. We connect agricultural production and land and environment, plants and animals with engineering and technology, that unique mix of biology and chemistry and engineering, which is an interesting nexus which we have as agricultural engineers. And so trying to get that point over and trying to make that point to people is something I've been doing for many, many years. I still continue to do it, and as I make the point, what's more rewarding, what's more misunderstood, what is more important. But then I do realise today I'm talking to the converted. I don't think I need to make those points to you because I think you know that well. But one of our jobs is to try to create a more positive image of agricultural engineers, and this is where I would want to really celebrate the work of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Represent all sectors of engineering, but they really do understand that agricultural engineering has a really important role to play in terms of the world, and are very keen to support that and want to portray a positive image of agricultural engineers and the role they play. And, there are some really exciting things going on, and I'm just going to touch into these in a bit more detail in just a few moments. But, we go on some of our meetings and we see some of the robotics and some of the automation and some of the exciting things going on. And you'll see all of that in Africa. And to me, that's very, very exciting. And I've sort of got this hunch that some countries in Africa may well go through that great step change leap. They might go, some of them, from third world to first world in one step. And with all those young people and with all that energy for those young people, harnessing that, I think, is a really crucial thing. And it's worth our while just dipping in for a few moments to the work of the Royal Academy of Engineering in Africa and how they spend some of our foreign aid budget on a thing called the Africa Prize. I'm just going to hopefully pop to the website, and with a little bit of luck, the website might be appearing in front of you at the moment. It's appeared in front of me. Could someone give me the thumbs up just to say, are you seeing a website? Thank you. Yeah. So it's worth talking about the Africa Prize for Engineering Innovation, which is an annual event. And for my sins, they still ask me to look at some of the submissions and make comments on them. And I'm not sure, I know we've got Paul Miller here as well today. I think Paul might get involved with that as well as a fellow of the Royal Academy. But it was interesting that the winner of this year's African Prize is this gentleman here from, where is he from? He's from, I don't know which country he's from. I don't think that, I know Ivory Coast, I think. But this is a chemical engineer who won the prize, and his innovation was a bio-waste system, bio-waste equipment innovation for smallholder farmers in West Africa. Well, that's agricultural engineering, isn't it? So the winner of the African Prize this year was operating in our area of work. And you can go on the website there, you can find out all about it and read all about his work and what he does. But the other thing you can do here is you can look at a fascinating interactive map of some of the work going on in Africa through the Africa Prize. The Africa Prize has been running for several years, and at the moment you should see a picture of Africa with various numbers on it. And you know, it tells us who the 7 winners are, who the 21 finalists were, and who the 74 shortlisted people were. And there's various categories, and one of the categories is agri-tech. Well, there have been no winners in agri-tech, but there have been 3 finalists and 19 people who've been shortlisted in the agri-tech area of the Africa Prize. So that just says to me that agricultural engineering, or agri-tech as we might call it in this guise, is having a real role to play. And if we look across those countries, you know, through that middle part of Africa, through, you know, Senegal across to Kenya and Uganda and Nigeria, quite a lot of interesting things going on. And it's just worth, for example, if we look in this area here, we have a gentleman here working on a vertical farm. We have another gentleman here working on a thing called the Sparky Dryer, which is for dehydrating fruit. So all that food we've harvested, which we could find going to waste, this particular innovation is about dehydrating or freeze drying the food in the field so it's better stored and is more able to, you know, more easily transport it. So good agricultural engineering principles in the post-harvest sector being applied by young and vibrant engineers. And if we go and have a look in South Africa, we had someone doing, again, a drying system to dry biomass like maize stalks, grass and wood chunks to be burnt to create heat. We have someone here who was producing a heavy-duty storage system for grain storage, and so on. I'm not going to dwell on these too much, but suffice to say, some really exciting things going on which have been put forward to the Africa Prize, which are sort of within our area of work. And that excites me because it shows me that there's a goodly number of young people who are keen and enthusiastic and who want to get involved, who want to promote the agricultural engineering discipline. Whether we call that agri-tech or not, I don't think really matters at this particular point. But I think it makes the point that there are some really good, well-qualified, vibrant young engineers who want to make it happen. So really what I say to you is do go and have a look at the Royal Academy of Engineering website. Go and have a delve around, really interesting. And there's some fascinating things going on. And the finalists, incidentally, were put forward. I remember one of these was, it was about fertilizer application in Zambia. Yeah, good bread and butter stuff to us. So really exciting, really interesting. I urge you to go and have a look at that afterwards. But I'll go back to my slides here for the last 10 minutes or so just to talk through it. But go and look at that. There's some really exciting, interesting things going on, which the Royal Academy of Engineering are supporting. And it's bringing to the fore our discipline across the African continent and in this country as well. So back to the report which I've been working on, and it's available to download. You can get it from the Pan African Society at the moment, but I'm going to send it through to Sarah so that we can have it on the IAgrE website. You know, I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but it's an 88-page report that's kept me busy for the past year. It has been thoroughly enjoyable. I've been working with two professional colleagues, Linus Opera, a professor at Stellenbosch University, and Jeff Smithers, a professor at University of KwaZulu-Natal. So I've been working with two professors and working on this. Well, I now realise what it's like to be a PhD student, because working with two eminent professors has been both enjoyable and challenging in terms of producing a report. I've been taking the mickey out of them a little bit and saying that you know, perhaps they should give me a PhD for this, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But that's by the way. But moving on, the report really makes recommendations around these 5 areas: raising the profile of agricultural engineering in Africa, reforming and modernising it, particularly in the education sector, ideas around how we grow the profession, ideas around how we create new opportunities, and ideas around how we sustain the contribution which we make. And we had a launch event on the 3rd of August where we had about 80 people, and it was a wonderful event because we had government ministers from all over Africa, and we also had people from some of the big banks in Africa as well. And I thought to have that audience was I thought fascinating, because that told us that the people who matter are really interested in what we're doing and see the value of it. So just to sort of mention a few things, you know, in terms of raising the profile, a few headlines, bits and pieces, you know, we want to sort of raise the profile with government, industry, the general public. We want to celebrate the good things we're doing. We want to make sure AgEng is featured more across the media. We want to identify our key partners, our professional partners and our important advocates. It's interesting that one of the ministers, I think it's the Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, is an agricultural engineer. That's pretty good, isn't it? So the first thing in terms of raising profile is about sort of that making a noise, getting ourselves heard, making sure that people can appreciate the contribution we are making to the discipline. The other one, you know, reforming and modernising. This is about the curriculum in universities and schools. There's no shortage of universities churning out undergraduates in agricultural engineering across Africa. But are they churning out what industry wants? Are they involving industry in developing the curriculum and shaping the curriculum to meet the needs of industry? You've probably worked out the answer to that. Also, it sounds so familiar. It's the stuff we're doing here, relating the STEM agenda to what this is all about, embracing new technologies. In universities, it's so often, it's very in the classroom, big group, 100 students in a lecture theatre, talking to them about agricultural engineering. Not enough doing, not enough hands-on experience in terms of the practical nature of the industry. So some reforms around that. Moving on, you know, trying to create a standard, the Pan-African standard for the engineering curriculum, so that wherever you go to do an agricultural engineering degree across Africa, you can be assured that it includes generally the same sort of content and the same sort of standards. Those of you here today will work in education know that it's difficult to source and recruit the right sort of, you know, get staff these days. And it's been worked out that if you've got a specialist in one topic in one part of Africa, why not make them available to talk to the same topic in a different part of Africa? So sharing resources, developing new leaders, working with industry to bring in industry expertise and industry factors to contribute to a university provision across Africa. Obviously, growing the profession, promoting professionalism, promoting the profession of agricultural engineering, something we're doing all the time. But again, in Africa, there's quite a movement to make that happen, working with the Royal Academy of Engineering, who view that as important as well. Engaging government, showcasing the role of engineers, finding advocates, celebrating their work, celebrating the contribution they make. And some other work which the Pan-African Society has been doing is generating a database of professional engineers so that people know where they can find a professional engineer. Interestingly, of course, in Africa, they don't have to worry about things like GDPR. They can do what they want because they don't exist in GDPR. Look at those little picture of those 6 little guys there. Those are the future. Those are the guys we need to recruit into engineering in the future. They are the future. And I think that's so much of what we're trying to achieve here. Creating new opportunities. I think that link back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how those are supported by agricultural engineers has been very well received. The job which we're continuing with is making that noise as to how the profession touches all of the food chain process, but also talking to the broader engineering disciplines and pointing out how they can contribute. You know, civil engineers who produce dams and roads and irrigation infrastructure as well. You know, there's a relationship to be had across the disciplines, electrical engineers, chemical engineers, all the different facets of the engineering profession. So all of that's very relevant as well. Collaboration, the same as anywhere across the universities. Trying to stop people working in isolation, even within universities. I often make the comment that agricultural engineers, we did a great job in inventing silos, didn't we? What we now need to do is invent silos that people can escape to see what's in the silo next door. There might be something really good comes as a result of that collaboration. We need to know what are the barriers and how do we break those barriers down. It's the same in Africa. And so some of our work is trying to understand that as well. Another area which I think is really important is around the concept of the funding agencies and the financial institutions and the role they can play in putting it together to sustainable solutions. The big machinery manufacturers have a role to play as well in terms of how we can work with them. I'm not going to name names, but some of them are very active in Africa and some of them are actively involved in Africa in a really positive way and putting on the ground some really sustainable solutions. There are others who still see it just as an export market without putting into place the support that is needed. So there's a job to be done, I think, to improve the awareness there, as there is with the non-governmental organisations and the charity partners who often do fantastic things, but need to think about how that can be made sustainable and how they can avoid a quick fix. The final area really is to work which has been going on to work on for the Pan-African Society to help it have a footprint across the whole of Africa and to act as a single voice to promote the profession. And I think we made a bit of traction there because I think some of the governments have understood that, yes, professional bodies that work together across the whole of Africa are worth supporting and are worth promoting. And because I think there is this realization that how is Africa going to be fed without the role of people who work collaboratively. So we've got quite a big audience, and this is an audience where you can help if you're involved and you are active in this area of work. But you know, they're all listed here, whether they're governments, universities, research partners, multinationals, manufacturers, global places, media, the press, banks, you name it, and the people of Africa as well. You know, they all have a role to play, and we are trying to make that point with our report to try to point people in the right direction. It's worth saying, and this is actually my final slide, but I'm going to just go and look at something else in a minute before I finish, because I agreed that for about 40 minutes, which I have, to open up a bit of time for Q&A. But I think we've done quite well in producing this report and getting the message over that agricultural engineering is quite a significant profession. And it's, you know, when it comes to these sustainable development goals and zero hunger and delivering food security, it has a vitally important role to play, as it does in the United Kingdom. I'm sure we'd all agree with that as well. And that's gone down well and been well received. And it's been a pleasure from my point of view to be involved with that. And when you read the report, you'll see it's got the IAgrE logo on it as well. We've also had a bit of involvement from Harper-Adams University as well in this as well. So we've got some of our significant UK partners who are involved with this, and of course the support of the Royal Academy of Engineering, who have been very supportive of the work we've been doing, and they put money into the African continent to support the infrastructure to help people communicate and talk and run conferences and events and things like that. But it is sobering. I was supported by a number of people across Africa, and toward about a month before we were due to publish, we learned that a colleague called Noble Bandana, who was from Uganda, had been taken by the COVID pandemic. He was 45. And that hit home hard to all of us, that one of our friends and colleagues who'd been a contributor to this report was taken by the pandemic. And we've actually dedicated the report in his memory. The point we make is let the tragic loss of Noble be a reminder to all of the important role we have to learn from our lessons and move forward. And we have dedicated the report to Noble, which I think in a country like Africa, which you'll all know is still, you know, the church is still a big player. Christian people with Christian values in many, many cases. That's hit people very, very hard. And we thought that was a really important thing to do. So you will be able to read that dedication when you read the report. I'm just going to break out of the report now and just go back to, hopefully you will be able to see the map of Africa again. But just to show you briefly, the front page of the website of the Pan-African Society. But I would take you to a page, you can click on a link here, to the event we did where we launched our report. And there are, I think, 9 videos in here, including myself, where the whole event was recorded on Zoom. And you can hear an introduction from Jeff Smithers and an overview of the report from me. Some words from the Royal Academy of Engineering and various reports from various people from across Africa, including banks. But I would want you to look at, if you care to, our own member Linus Opara's report, which is the very last one. I won't play it now, but if you visit that and you listen to Linus, an IAgrE member, talking about this, and you hear his passion, he's a great advocate for agricultural engineering in Africa and a worthy advocate of the Institution of Agricultural Engineers and a very worthy member. And personally, I think he's a member we should celebrate in the near future. So I'm going to be putting some thought to how we can thank him as an institution for his contribution to the sector. Thoroughly decent man. So I do urge you to go and have a look at that when you've got a bit of time after the event. It's all there. You might not want to look at me, but look at the others. It's all very interesting and informative about what's going on there. So there we are. I'm going to stop sharing now. I hope that was what you wanted and what you expected and was of interest to you. And as I said to Sarah, I would sort of leave the last 15 minutes or so for any discussion and questions. But I hope that's given you some insight into some of the stuff we've been doing to get involved. I'm reading a few questions here. Someone says, good to see a TAFE tractor at work in Uganda. Thank you. Alan says, the Douglas Bomford Trust has sponsored similar projects to the winner of the African Engineering Prize as well, Prize 2. That's very good. And talks about how DBT should promote this area of work. Thank you, Paul and Alan, for that. That's much appreciated. There's a question, do we have a presence on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter? The answer is yes. It's all there. So, yeah, they have a secretariat based in Victoria, Shikota, I can't remember her name now, but there's a young lady there who runs the office, who runs the social media, is promoting this. So anything we can do to promote the agenda, I think is a worthy thing to get involved with. So there we are. Over to you. I hope that was what you wanted. I hope you found that interesting and useful and engaging, and give you insight into some of our engagement in Africa. What I would say is this is not about the old mother country saying this is what we're going to do to you. This is about Africa doing it for itself. And to that end, this is for Africa, by Africa, with our help. And I think at that point, I'll shut up and take any questions.
Thanks, Alastair. So you answered, I think, there's a question from James, or if not, Alastair can probably see the question in the chat.
Oh, it says, as a recent AfroAgEng graduate who is now working in Africa, would it be recommended to join AfroAgEng as well as IAgrE? Well, of course I would say yes to that, wouldn't I? Definitely. If Sarah puts me in touch with you, I'll be able to connect you to the Secretariat, and I'm sure they'd be very pleased to have you on board and have you part of it, because I think they're doing quite a lot to certainly using social media to bring together young engineers, because I think everyone knows that that's the group of people who are going to take this forward. So yes is the answer.
Okay. Question from yourself. How do they market? You say there's a lot of universities churning out agricultural engineers. How is it sort of marketed to people? How is it promoted to get them into it? Obviously in the UK, it's quite centered around machinery, tends to be very biased towards machinery. How is that in Africa? Because
yes, much more, yeah, much more irrigation, much more mechanization, much more around, building dams, saving water, creating the infrastructure. So I'd say the agricultural engineering degrees I've seen in Africa probably have a bit more civil engineering in them than ours do. What they lack is practical hands-on stuff. But with all the emerging work around, mobile phones and using an app to control something of the electronics and sensors, that side's quite strong as well. So yeah, it's agricultural engineering, but the balance of the curriculum is probably balanced a bit more towards the bits which are important to Africa, which are the post-harvest side of it, the water circulation, water storage, irrigation side of it as well. Interesting, when you download the report, there's reference to a very interesting company called ZZ2, who operate in South Africa, who produce pineapples, mangoes, soft fruit, tomatoes, things like that. And very, very advanced company, very progressive. But such is their interest in agricultural engineering, they've actually produced their own report as to the job roles which agricultural engineers have in this company called ZZ2. And I think they employ something like 20 agricultural engineers. So some of them are working on irrigation and water distribution, some of them are working on water collection, others of them are working on transportation. So, it's quite an interesting angle that they've written their own report on the role of agricultural engineers in their company, which I thought was very well informed. I think that answers your question, Charlie. So it's a slightly different mix of subjects, really.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions for Alastair from anybody?
Yeah, I've seen Paul's made a comment. Having worked in parts of Africa, I've learned about the problems of scale and this is a comment from Paul, scale and maintaining technological process. How can these sorts of situations be addressed? It's a huge one. I think it's about partnership. And this is where I would cite the work of Mark Moore. Mark would make a very good speaker for one of these lectures about his work on the Future Farm project. I know he's taken the Future Farm project. I think Mark's working in Russia now, and they're even taking the concept of the Future Farm project to Switzerland, I think. But the whole concept is an interesting one because it's about what he calls horizontal integration. It's about making sure that when you put the technology on the ground, you also put on the ground the technicians who are going to support it, and the facilities and the workshops and all the stuff which is going to maintain it, and connecting together. I think he talks about how you need to connect together the seed and fertilizer manufacturer with the fertilizer distributor manufacturer, so that they all work as one. So pardon me. So I think it's that horizontal integration is where it has to go, and that's the point we make in our report, really. That we can't operate in silos. We've got to work as one, and that just requires everyone to be noisy and make that happen. And I think the likes of AgCo, are doing a pretty good job in Zambia. So that would have been my answer, Paul. I don't think it answers your question very well. Tricky question, because it's a difficult one to answer. What we got? I'm looking at a few more points. Are there any interactions or connections with Engineers Without Borders? Yes, but there could be more. I think there could be more. Is there still the feed of used agricultural engineering equipment going to Africa from far western part of the world? Not so much. I think there's a lot of new stuff going. I think you'll find China and India have quite a big influence in Africa these days. So there's quite a lot of infrastructure going in from, as is all over the world, really. It's a challenge, but there is quite a lot of work going on to connect different parts of Africa, and as you would imagine, a lot of Chinese infrastructure is being developed. You have to wonder about what the wider motives of that are for, but let's not go there. That's a subject of another thing altogether, I think. Sarah mentions that Mark Moore did a branch meeting on the subject, and that there is a place on the website where you can go and have a look at a video of Mark. I'd urge you to look at that. Mark is a really good speaker on the topic. Someone else said too many graduates come out of the university with lots of very complex theory, but very little practical experience or even common sense. Well, let's not be too unfair. And many only want an office job in town. Well, I think that is a challenge, and I think we've identified that challenge. And I think in terms of curriculum reform and making it more hands-on and bringing in more industry connection and getting students involved in running projects for industry is what's going on here now. It's better developed in some parts of Africa than it is in others. But for example, there's a university in let me get this right, I think it's in Tanzania, where there's some really good collaborative work going on between the university and industry, and that can only benefit the students in a positive way. So you've got to start somewhere. So I think we are moving forward on that one. And I think not just are we moving forward on that one, but there's a recognition that needs to be done to make the degrees less theoretical, less academic, and more hands-on. What there is, in my view, is a huge void in technicians, the sort of level 3 type of level that we would talk around here. There's a huge void in there. A lot of graduates coming out, but not enough of the people at a more technician level. Someone else is celebrating my enthusiasm. Thank you, Declan.
I think the technique is you can't have one without the other, can you? I mean, that the reason the class combine was part there, I guess, is because it's got nobody to support it. They can't use it. That's
right. That's the problem. And, it's even so far as, a whole pile of tractors going and they run out of fuel and no one knows how to bleed it. Yeah. It's as fundamental as that.
It's something I say to students, we talk about autonomous vehicles and robotics and all the stuff that's going on at the moment in sort of research and academia is that, one thing's for sure is when this stuff ends up on farms, you're going to need technicians to commission it, service it, repair it, look after it.
And I think that's where Mark, that's one of the points you'd hear Mark Moore making.
Yes.
About that as well. And it's I think that's being recognised now, and I think my view is that I think some of the global manufacturers, it'd be quite interesting. I mean, you've got your background with JCB, and we've got Paul here as well, who's worked internationally as well, and I think certainly from what I've seen, some of the big global players do see you don't just send the equipment there, you actually have to put on the ground the infrastructure to support that as well, and everything that goes hand in hand with that, you know, the training for the technicians and the support systems and the structures and everything like that. But of course, it's bad enough, you know, it's tricky enough here in Europe, but, you know, when you've got the countries in Africa where the roads are so poor and you've got a global pandemic going on as well, it's very, very difficult to sustain these things. Really, really hard. Yeah.
We've probably got time for one more question. Mike Cullen's put a comment on there.
What did Mike say? He agrees. Thank you, Mike, for agreeing. Yeah, technology being left on the side because it's you know, parts don't arrive. Yeah, all of that. Again, it comes back to that infrastructure deficit, which is so vital.
Yeah, and probably the last question from John.
Yeah, sorry, John, I can't answer the question to that one. Yeah, I think, yeah, there is all, you know, I can only talk about what I know about, and obviously the Royal Academy of Engineering is what I've been involved with, but, you know, let's not forget that there's the likes of Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation who've just about eliminated malaria from Africa. So there are all sorts of organisations doing all sorts of things. And I suppose a bit of a takeaway at this particular point is maybe some of those organisations ought to work with each other a little bit more collaboratively as well.
Okay, thank you, Alastair. Great presentation, very, very different to what we've had before. Thanks for taking the time out to do that for us today. It's very much appreciated. I'm sure everybody found it really interesting.
I'll send the presentation and everything to Sarah so that it's there for people to have a look at if they wish. Yes,
brilliant. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and hope you will all join us for our next lecture on the 14th of September, where we'll be joined by James Croxford from Harper Adams, who's going to talk about some of the benefits of computer simulation in engineering. And also, just before we close, I'd like to remind everybody of our annual conference, Future Fuels in Agriculture, which will be held online on the 3rd of November. We have a great lineup of speakers from in and around our industry. So please go onto the website, check it out, and more importantly, book your place. Please also share with your colleagues who may be interested. It's not just about machine fuels, but also how fuel can be a product from the land as well. So all that's left to say is thanks again to everybody for joining, and see you next time. Bye-bye.